Hello and welcome. Today we're looking at a developing story that reveals significant challenges facing Moscow's military operations in Ukraine. The situation involves one of the Kremlin's few remaining international partners and raises questions about the sustainability of current combat strategies. Let's examine what recent intelligence reports are telling us about ammunition supplies, military cooperation, and the broader implications for the ongoing conflict. When hostilities began in February 2022, the international landscape looked very different for Moscow. The country maintained diplomatic and economic relationships with numerous nations across multiple continents. Fast forward to today, and that network of partnerships has contracted dramatically. The military operation in Ukraine triggered widespread international condemnation, with dozens of countries implementing economic restrictions and reducing bilateral cooperation. Trade agreements were suspended, diplomatic ties were scaled back, and Russia found itself increasingly isolated from much of the global community. The extent of this isolation became starkly visible in February 2023, when the United Nations General Assembly voted on a resolution demanding an immediate withdrawal from Ukrainian territory and calling for an end to hostilities. The vote revealed just how narrow Moscow's circle of support had become. Only 6 countries joined Russia in opposing the resolution: Belarus, Syria, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Mali, Nicaragua, and Eritrea, even nations that had historically maintained close ties with Moscow, including several Central Asian republics that had long depended on economic and security relationships with their northern neighbor, chose to support the resolution or abstain rather than stand with Russia. This diplomatic isolation has forced Moscow to rely heavily on a small group of partners willing to provide material support for the military campaign. Among these, North Korea has emerged as one of the most active contributors, going beyond diplomatic statements to provide tangible military assistance. Pyongyang's support for Moscow predates the current conflict. Back in 2017, North Korea became one of only a handful of nations to officially recognize Crimea as part of the Russian Federation. This early gesture of support established a foundation for the deeper military cooperation that would follow. As the conflict in Ukraine intensified, North Korea expanded its involvement significantly. Several months into the fighting, Pyongyang took the step of recognizing the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics as independent states, a move that prompted Kyiv to sever all remaining diplomatic relations with North Korea. But recognition wasn't the only form of support Pyongyang offered. Intelligence reports indicate that North Korea has supplied various types of military hardware, including self-propelled artillery systems and multiple rocket launchers. Perhaps most significantly, the DPRK has deployed military personnel to support Russian operations. Estimates suggest that between 12,000 and 14,000 North Korean service members have been sent to Russia, including special operations units, engineering specialists trained in mine clearance, and construction workers tasked with rebuilding infrastructure in areas affected by combat operations, particularly in the Kursk region. However, the most critical contribution from North Korea has come in the form of ammunition. Artillery shells are the lifeblood of modern ground warfare, and the conflict in Ukraine has consumed these munitions at extraordinary rates. No matter how advanced the equipment or how well trained the troops, military operations cannot continue without adequate supplies of ammunition. History provides numerous examples of offensives that collapsed not because of tactical failures, but simply because units ran out of shells to fire. In this conflict, ammunition has taken on even greater importance due to Moscow's reliance on attrition-based strategies. Russian forces have conducted sustained bombardment campaigns involving drone swarms, aerial strikes, artillery barrages, and infantry assaults, all designed to gradually wear down Ukrainian defensive positions through sheer volume of fire. Maintaining this intensity of fire requires enormous quantities of ammunition, and North Korea has played a crucial role in meeting that demand. According to estimates from South Korean intelligence agencies, between mid-2022 and mid-2024, Pyongyang shipped more than 13,000 containers of munitions to Russia. These containers held the equivalent of approximately 6,152mm artillery shells. At the time, South Korean defense analysts noted that Russia appeared to be formalizing North Korea as a supply base for weapons and ammunition, recognizing that sustained operations in Ukraine would require access to external sources of munitions. More recent figures provide additional context while also revealing emerging problems. According to Ukrainian military intelligence, North Korea supplied around 6.5 million artillery shells to Russia from 2023 onward. However, the rate of deliveries has changed dramatically. Vadim Skibitsky, who serves as deputy chief of Ukraine's defense intelligence, revealed in an interview with Reuters that shipments in 2025 have declined by approximately 50% compared to the previous year. Even more striking, intelligence monitoring detected 0 shipments during the entire month of September. While some deliveries resumed in October, the overall volume remains substantially lower than peak periods. Several factors could explain this decline. The first and most straightforward is that North Korea's stockpiles are being depleted. In 2022, intelligence assessments indicated that the DPRK possessed vast reserves of Soviet-caliber ammunition that had been accumulated over decades. This enabled Pyongyang to send large shipments without immediately impacting its own military readiness. Additionally, multiple North Korean munitions factories reportedly shifted to maximum capacity operations to manufacture additional supplies for Russia. But these stockpiles, however large, are not infinite. The sustained rate of deliveries over more than 2 years, combined with Russia's enormous consumption rates, has gradually drained these reserves. In late 2022, Russian forces were firing an average of 20,000 artillery shells per day. Moscow reportedly set an annual target of 5.5 million shells to maintain operational momentum and achieve strategic objectives. These numbers are extraordinarily difficult to sustain. Even for a country of Russia's size and industrial capacity, producing this volume of ammunition presents serious challenges. Estimates suggest that Russian factories can manufacture approximately 3 million shells annually, meaning the country was forced to source nearly half its required ammunition from external suppliers, with North Korea filling much of that gap. For a time, Pyongyang was able to meet Moscow's needs. But as the conflict extends into its 4th year, maintaining these supply lines has become increasingly difficult. A second possible explanation for reduced shipments involves changing priorities in Pyongyang. North Korea faces multiple demands on its limited resources and industrial capacity. Recently, the country's military unveiled the Hwasong-20, described as their latest intercontinental ballistic missile with a claimed range of 15,000 kilometers, theoretically capable of reaching any location within the continental United States. The DPRK has also conducted numerous missile tests and is actively pursuing various military research and development programs. Skibitsky's comments to Reuters revealed that North Korea has recently focused on expanding drone production capabilities and has begun mass manufacturing 2 distinct types of unmanned aerial vehicles: short-range, first-person view drones and larger medium-range attack platforms. With finite industrial resources and workforce capacity, North Korean military planners may have decided that continuing to prioritize ammunition production for export ranks lower than advancing domestic weapons programs. Whatever the underlying causes, the result is clear. Russia is receiving substantially fewer munitions from North Korea than in previous periods. This creates significant problems for Russian military operations. If Russia hopes to continue its current operational approach, it needs massive quantities of ammunition, and domestic production alone cannot meet demand. If North Korean shipments continue to diminish, Moscow will rapidly run out of alternatives. The country has limited options for alternative suppliers. Belarus and Iran have provided some assistance, but no other nation has demonstrated the same willingness or capacity to supply munitions on the scale that North Korea has managed. Reduced ammunition availability will have direct battlefield consequences. Artillery units and mechanized brigades will find themselves with insufficient supplies to maintain current rates of fire against Ukrainian positions. Russian commanders will need to revise tactical plans to account for these ammunition constraints, potentially reducing the frequency or intensity of attacks in some sectors, or concentrating remaining supplies on the most strategically important areas. This could create opportunities for Ukrainian forces to launch counterattacks, strengthen defensive positions, or even recapture territory in regions where Russian ammunition stocks are depleted. But the challenges extend beyond simple quantity. Quality has emerged as an equally serious concern. According to Ukrainian intelligence assessments, approximately half of the shells supplied by North Korea are so old and unreliable that Russian forces cannot use them directly in combat. Instead, these munitions must be diverted to Russian military facilities for refurbishment before they can be deployed. This is far from ideal. Russian commanders would prefer to receive shipments from Pyongyang and immediately distribute them to frontline units ready for use. Instead, each batch of incoming ammunition must undergo quality control inspections to determine which shells are combat-ready. Many fail these checks and must be sent to Russian facilities for repairs and upgrades before finally making their way to combat zones. This process consumes additional time, money, and resources. Russia is paying to purchase these shells initially, then spending more to make them usable. Even shells deemed acceptable for immediate deployment often prove defective. Ukrainian political analyst Olena Kryzhenivska noted in a 2024 report that Russia faces challenges increasing domestic weapons production, including shortages of skilled workers. She cited examples such as Uralvagonzavod, a tank manufacturer recruiting 250 convicts from a nearby prison to address labor shortages. Kryzhenivska also highlighted that Russia relies heavily on munitions from allies, particularly Belarus, Iran, and North Korea. She referenced Ukrainian defense officials reporting that approximately 50% of shells shipped from North Korea are faulty. This is a remarkable failure rate. Half of the ammunition proves unusable, either misfiring, failing to detonate properly, or malfunctioning in other ways that render them worthless or even dangerous to the troops attempting to use them. This situation represents a significant departure from Russia's historical military standing. For decades, the country was regarded as one of the world's premier military powers, commanding one of the largest armies on the planet, with thousands of tanks, tens of thousands of armored vehicles, sophisticated missile systems, extensive artillery capabilities, robust air defense networks, and substantial air and naval forces. Countries around the world viewed potential conflict with Russian military forces with considerable apprehension. The image of Russian military might was a cornerstone of the country's international influence. Today, that image is being fundamentally challenged. Not only has Russia struggled to achieve decisive results against a much smaller opponent in Ukraine, but the country has been reduced to purchasing outdated, defective ammunition from one of its few remaining allies. The reliance on substandard North Korean munitions reveals the depth of Russia's ammunition crisis and the limitations of its defense industrial base. This entire arrangement appears fundamentally unsustainable for multiple reasons. First, as already discussed, North Korea cannot continue indefinitely shipping millions of artillery shells to Russia. The stockpiles are finite. Production capacity is limited, and shipment volumes are already declining, as demonstrated by the 50% reduction in deliveries during 2025. Second, even if North Korea finds ways to continue sending some ammunition, a substantial portion will remain defective, forcing Russia to either invest resources in repairs or distribute faulty munitions to combat units and hope for the best. Russia has few attractive alternatives. The list of countries willing to fuel Moscow's military operations remains short, so Russian forces will either have to accept North Korea's unreliable supplies or attempt to sustain operations with only a fraction of the ammunition required for current strategies. Meanwhile, the arrangement appears to have worked out reasonably well for North Korea. While various countries have criticized Pyongyang's involvement in the conflict, Wi Sung-lak, former South Korean ambassador to Russia, has suggested that Kim Jong Un's decision to support Moscow has proven beneficial for North Korea. Wi explained that North Korea officially claims annual grain production of approximately 4 million tons, including rice, barley, and wheat. However, much of what Pyongyang categorizes as rice production actually consists of potatoes, leaving the country facing significant shortages of staple foods. According to Wi's analysis, North Korea's actual grain production falls roughly 1 million tons short of what the population requires. If Russia is providing between 600,000 and 700,000 tons of rice, that quantity covers more than half of North Korea's annual shortage. Wi noted that while North Korea faced severe food shortages in recent years, the situation has likely improved substantially due to Russian food shipments received in exchange for military supplies. From Pyongyang's perspective, selling several containers of artillery shells enables the country to obtain hundreds of thousands of tons of rice, addressing critical domestic needs. Wi also suggested that Kim Jong Un may believe that extensive support for Russia creates reciprocal obligations. Having fought alongside Russian forces, North Korea might expect Moscow to provide military assistance if conflict erupts on the Korean peninsula. Whether such expectations are realistic remains uncertain, but there's little doubt that the Russia-North Korea partnership will continue into the foreseeable future. As Skibitsky revealed in his Reuters interview, North Korean officials have closely monitored events in Ukraine, attempting to learn as much as possible from the conflict. Pyongyang has paid particular attention to Russian drone operations, studying how unmanned aerial vehicles are employed to attack targets, and applying that knowledge to North Korea's own developing drone production programs. While exact production figures remain unclear, it's conceivable that North Korea could eventually supply significant numbers of drones to Russia, potentially increasing the size and effectiveness of Russian drone swarms. However, if the 50% defect rate for artillery shells is any indication, North Korean drones may also prove unreliable and problematic. Russia could find itself once again on the losing end of these transactions, investing in basic, poorly manufactured drones that require additional time and resources to repair and upgrade before reaching combat-ready status. Russia is also preparing to welcome approximately 12,000 North Korean workers before the end of 2025. These laborers will be employed at enterprises within the Alabuga Special Economic Zone in Tatarstan, where Russia manufactures a significant percentage of the long-range drones used to attack Ukrainian targets. According to information posted by Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, discussions regarding this labor arrangement took place in late October between Russian government officials and representatives from Jihyang Technology Trade Company, a North Korean entity responsible for recruiting and selecting workers. The reported terms include wages of approximately $2.50 per hour, with shifts lasting at least 12 hours. This arrangement represents another dimension of deepening strategic cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang, with North Korean labor directly supporting production of weapons systems used in attacks against Ukraine. While the growing relationship between these two countries raises concerns, there are practical limits to what North Korea can provide. A few additional batches of defective ammunition won't fundamentally alter battlefield dynamics. Ukraine, by contrast, continues to receive support from a much broader coalition of Western partners, including the United States and European Union member states, who provide financial assistance, military equipment, ammunition, intelligence support, and other resources. The contrast between Russia's limited, unreliable partnership with North Korea and Ukraine's extensive network of international support illustrates how dramatically the geopolitical landscape has shifted since the conflict began. What was once considered one of the world's most formidable military powers now finds itself dependent on substandard supplies from an isolated partner while struggling to sustain operations against a determined opponent backed by the world's most advanced military alliance. Thank you for watching.